One of the biggest misses in the Game of Thrones TV show was the exclusion of giant ice spiders. In the books, the White Walkers of legend were known to ride massive spiders of ice. So if the others were not scary enough, just imagine a massive undead Shelob hunting you down as the cold closes in. Did you know that the big man George R.R. Martin originally planned a 5-year time skip between book 3 and 4? This was to allow a lot of his characters to age up. Bran and Arya would have developed their skills with the three-eyed crow and the faceless men. Daenerys' dragons would have grown into formidable beasts. Jon would have developed as Lord Commander, and other minor characters like Ned Dane would have had time to grow into a warrior worthy of the legendary sword Dorn. George planned a long prologue and a series of flashbacks to catch the reader up on the last 5 years. However, after almost a year of writing, George scrapped the idea. Although the time skip worked for certain characters and events, for others it simply did not fit. Events in King's Landing were moving too fast. The White Walkers' advance would have been slowed down, and characters like Stannis and Cersei would not sit idle for 5 years. Instead of a time skip, George decided to split the next book into 2, and many of the chapters he wrote in that first year were reworked into A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. We all have our kinks. Some like a nice pair of melons, while others prefer cake. But have you ever become bricked up by watching fire? Well, for Aerys Targaryen, the Mad King, it was even worse than this. In his later years, Aerys Targaryen became obsessed with fire, which eventually grew so consuming that he could only perform after watching someone burn to death. It became a regular occurrence for Aerys to execute alleged traitors with wildfire, and then afterwards he would seek out his wife. At the young age of 14, after the death of the tyrannical Maegor the Cruel, Jaehaerys Targaryen claimed the Iron Throne. The realm was poised to enter a time of healing, but first, Jaehaerys needed to deal with the remnants of Maegor's supporters. Chief among them were Maegor's remaining Kingsguard. Jaehaerys offered the White Cloaks the option to join the Night's Watch or face execution, while others chose to take the black. Harold Longwood demanded a trial by combat. Eager to prove himself and demonstrate his fighting prowess to the realm, Jaehaerys accepted the challenge and wished to face the former Kingsguard himself. However, given his age, Jaehaerys' mother and the small council forbade it. Instead, Sir Giles Morrigan stood for Jaehaerys, easily defeating Sir Harold. For his loyalty, he was named Lord Commander of Jaehaerys' Kingsguard. Jaehaerys would get his wish to fight a trial by combat decades later when he slew Sir Braxton Beesbury, who was accused of seducing one of Jaehaerys' daughters. This is Mad Danelle Lothston. She was the Lady of Harrenhal about 70 years before the main series. She was once a noble woman who would lead her armies to war while clad in black armor. However, in her later years, she turned to the dark arts. Some said on moonless nights, giant bats would fly from Harrenhal and kidnap children to be brought back to Mad Danelle for her cookpots. Other tales tell that she bathed in blood and held feasts of human flesh. She brought chaos and madness to the Riverlands, which eventually led to an uprising against her that resulted in her death and the downfall of the LOTHSTON line. How did Robert Baratheon become known as the Demon of the Trident? In his prime, Robert was an imposing figure. He towered above most men, standing 6.5 feet tall, and when in battle, he wore a massive antlered helmet, which gave him the appearance of a horned god. Bobby B was also muscled like a maiden's fantasy, and strong beyond belief. Ned Stark could barely manage to lift Robert's warhammer. His strength, size, and love for battle made him a force of nature if you got in his way. And at the Battle of the Trident, Robert was nearly unstoppable. He carved a bloody path through the loyalist forces until he came face to face with the source of his fury, Rhaegar Targaryen. The pair clashed in single combat, and although Rhaegar was a skilled warrior, Robert crushed his breastplate with his mighty hammer. And it was here, standing over Rhaegar's broken body, that Robert earned the name Demon of the Trident. Varamyr SIXSKINS was a legendary wildling skin changer in the Game of Thrones universe. He was a powerful warg who controlled 3 wolves, a 13-foot snow bear, a shadow cat, and an eagle. But before he was a mighty skin changer, Varamyr was a sickly child. At the age of 6, Varamyr skin changed into one of the family's dogs and killed his younger, healthy brother. When his father went to put down the dogs, Varamyr slipped into one of the dog's skins and felt the animal's death, which caused the young Varamyr to scream out, which informed his parents that he was a warg. Varamyr was cast out and sent to live with an elderly warg warg named Hagon, who taught the boy of how to master his skin-changing abilities. Varamyr grew in power, surpassing all other wargs he encountered. When Hagon was near death, Varamyr pushed Hagon's consciousness from his wolf and claimed it for his own, denying his master a second life. When Varamyr's own end approached, he attempted to warg into a human body. However, his will was repelled and he had to settle to live out his second life within one of his wolves. Did you know that in the Game of Thrones books, Sansa Stark and the Hound kiss? Or at least that's what Sansa thinks. Towards the end of the Battle of Blackwater, Sandor Clegane finds his way to Sansa's bedroom, where he offers to take her from the city to the north. The Hound then pushes her onto the bed holding a knife to her throat and demands she sing a song for him. She complies and the Hound ends up leaving the city without her. However, when remembering the moment, Sansa recalls that the Hound kissed her, which marked her first kiss with a man. When asked about which situation is true, George R.R. Martin confirmed the kiss never happened, but that it will become important in future books, likely implying that Sansa is an unreliable narrator. The Fourth Dornish War might be the greatest Targaryen victory ever. 83 years after Aegon's conquest, Prince of Dorne rallied his forces and hired pirates to invade the Stormlands by sea. He hoped to take King Jaehaerys unawares. However, the Iron Throne had spies everywhere, and as the Dornish forces approached, they were met by 3 dragons, Vermithor, Caraxes, and Vhagar, ridden by King Jaehaerys and his 2 sons. The dragons fell upon the fleet, burning the ships and sailors alike in a devastating inferno. Though the Dornish were armed with scorpion bolts, no shots met their mark that day, and by the time the sun set, the battle was over. The ships burned in the darkness like 100 candles floating on the sea. While the Dornish were utterly defeated, King Jaehaerys did not lose a single man. Bloodraven was once the most powerful man in all of Westeros, but how did he end up at the Night's Watch? After the death of King Maekar, a great council was held to determine who should inherit the Iron Throne, as the succession was not clear. Many with Targaryen blood were considered, including Aenys Blackfyre, the 5th son of Daemon Blackfyre, who was a legitimized bastard son of House Targaryen, who had once led a rebellion in an attempt to claim the Iron Throne. 2 of Daemon's other sons had also had their own rebellions, but all had failed. Aenys Blackfyre chose a more diplomatic approach and put his name forward to be considered in the matter of succession. He was granted permission from Bloodraven to present his claim in person. However, when Aenys arrived, Bloodraven broke his word. Aenys was seized and executed. His head was presented to the Lords of the Great Council as a warning to any remaining Blackfyre sympathizers. After the council elected Aegon V as king, his first act was to arrest Bloodraven and send him to the wall for his crimes. Have you heard of the Finger Dance? A wild axe-throwing game played by the Ironborn from the Game of Thrones universe. It is played by at least 2 people who take turns throwing a hand axe at each other. One must either catch the axe or dodge it without missing a step. The game usually ends with a dancer losing 1 or more of their fingers. As teenagers, Aeron and Uragon Greyjoy, 2 of Theon's uncles, performed the Finger Dance. Unfortunately, Yuri lost half his hand in the dance and later died of infection from the wound. According to Ironborn legend, Harris Hoare became the king of the Iron Islands after winning a game of the Finger Dance. However, he lost 2 fingers in the process, earning him the nickname of Stump Hand.